Thanks for joining us today. We're here to talk about branding for Southeast Asia. Obviously, it's a complex market with a lot of different values and languages to consider, so that's what we're going to try and drill down on. I'm going to let my panelists introduce themselves because they'll do it much better than I will. So we start with, yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ani Tankawale. I lead the Southeast Asia agency team for Facebook. Been at Facebook for almost 8 years, and it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for staying.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Candice. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer for Shopback. Within my portfolio will be country management as well as helming regional marketing.
Hey, everyone. I'm Alan, Vice President of Digital and Loyalty at Marriott. Some of the functions I look after is loyalty marketing and program, buzz marketing partnerships, strategic partnerships and cards, as well as digital marketing.
Great. So yeah, let's start by drilling down into the topic of brand narrative and whether, due to the multitude of cultures that we talked about, it makes sense to have multiple narratives, or whether this can, it risks diluting your brand. Alan, I'm keen to go to you first for this, being from Marriott, being a global brand. What's your view on this?
So I think it's quite important. I don't think it actually dilutes a brand to localize, but I think it's very critical that whatever you localize sticks to a core set of brand values. So for example, when we launched our loyalty program, our travel program earlier this year, Marriott Bonvoy. So Bonvoy is French expression for travel. So we also created a Chinese name, 万豪旅行家. So that is also expressing the brand value of being a travel expert. So I think we're going to start looking to do a lot more of that. But I think your brand does not get diluted if you really stick to your core values and really in every type of localization express that fully.
I agree with Alan. I think that's absolutely true in terms of it really depends on how you express that narrative. I would share 3 thoughts, perhaps. I think it's going to be very key that people internally as well understand what the brand is about. A brand is almost like a construct an identity. And one thing we pay a lot of attention to is how do we onboard new people to the company, as well as how do we bring people together to develop initiatives that are of big campaigns or big marketing efforts so that everyone's on the same page. So firstly, people will be really key in terms of making sure that everyone's on the same page. Second, I think the relevance of channels differ across the geography of Southeast Asia as well. Social media is such a big channel or marketing tool for many brands, but the relevance of which would also differ. So for example, for us, we've seen that Insta Stories work incredibly well in Indonesia. YouTube, perhaps for us, has worked better on Philippines as well. The third thing I'd like to share is about storytelling. I think in terms of expressing narratives, storytelling is a very powerful way to communicate a brand as well.
Okay. And Annie, obviously Asia represents a huge growth engine for Facebook. What are the ways that Facebook is trying to attract agencies and brands in the region, especially in Southeast Asia?
Yeah, so for us, whether we're working with agencies or we're working with brands, our goal is to help your businesses grow and to be successful. So for agencies, it's a people business, and to ensure that people working at the agencies have the best possible training and tools and technology at their fingertips so that they're able to provide the best possible solution to their clients. Similarly, for brands, it's really important that they are able to get discovered. What we're learning when we speak to founders is that more than 50% of their sales are actually coming not from the city in which they're based, but oftentimes in countries outside of where they're located. So being able to make that discovery really possible, whether it's through stories, like you said, or in the Explore tab of Instagram, we're trying to make sure that they're aware of these new technologies and where consumers are spending time.
And I guess on that point of discovery, there are a lot of brands, and there's a limited space for them to advertise. Would you encourage, when you're speaking to brands and agencies, to kind of bring down their audience segments and refine them and make them quite specific rather than broad in terms of helping with that discovery, or what's the strategy?
Yeah, we're advocating brands and agencies to map the behaviors that we're seeing in digital or in mobile, online, with the strategies that they are creating. So for example, just the previous panel was talking about video, and that resonated with us a lot because we're seeing more than 100 million hours of video watched every single day, and 76% of adults, these are adults, not kids, said that they make a purchase after they see a video. So video is clearly motivating purchase behaviors and ensuring that we are providing trainings and insights on video so that when you do create the content, it's discovered and it enables in brand consideration and ultimately purchase.
Okay, but just going back, I mean, in terms of that, the audience segment, what kind of split are you seeing in terms of how specific you can be? Can you be too specific and then you're kind of only reaching about 100 people, or what would you say is a good mix generally?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think what we have seen is going too specific can, of course, limit your potential to find new audiences and grow your business. Similarly, the one thing that we're advocating for, especially in Southeast Asia, where we're seeing a high amount of conversion happening on messaging apps, it's really, if your business is in a way where you can ship your products, where it's not something that needs to be consumed immediately, it's not a service, to really think beyond your borders. So for example, we worked with a small business in Malaysia who sells jewelry. Initially, she was really limiting her targeting to women that are based in Malaysia or even in Kuala Lumpur. When we got her to think about her target audience, the millennials that she was reaching on Instagram, and really make it cross-border, that's when her business truly blossomed. She was finding that more and more orders were coming from Europe or coming from North America. So when that's feasible, we are encouraging them to look beyond like your natural targeting. Of course, if you're a local bakery in Singapore, it probably makes sense to reach those 100 people who are going to walk in.
Great. And Candice and Alan, outside of tailoring brand message and creative, how do you go about managing your media plan across Southeast Asia, taking into account not just the fragmentation of audiences, but of media platforms? There's obviously a lot of different ways of reaching consumers. How do you go about that?
Sure. So with respect to media planning, it's not just about how effective it is, but also cost efficiency. In some markets, we utilize billboards a lot more. For example, Indonesia and Philippines. But in countries like Singapore, you don't really see as much billboards being available. We would think about using other forms of media as well. So I think in terms of media planning, it's about ROI on the channel level and relevance to the audience. For example, in terms of most of our Southeast Asia developing markets, the app or mobile is really the first screen. And in terms of mobile advertising, that's where we actually invest heavily in Facebook. That's proven to be a very effective source. Whereas in some other markets, perhaps on TV, through variety shows might be more effective, for example, in Australia. And even with that, on TV, there are certain nuances whereby in Taiwan, it's really like Yahoo TV that has been more interesting for us. So I think it's about really efficacy on a cost level as well and relevance to the audience. And I think it's also important to understand where consumers are in their journey. For example, in terms of personalization or segmentation, I don't think that's a fixed bucket, but something's a little bit more fluid. We would tend to perhaps target or retarget someone who has just made an order on an online travel agency for experiences. And I think it's very much about understanding which platform and when is relevant for the user as well.
So we're shifting a lot more media in Southeast Asia on programmatic or different types of channels where we can plug in our DMP, our data management platform. So that enables us to reach audiences across a wide range of channels. So we're targeting individuals instead of picking channels, and whether it's out of home or TV, right? So through programmatic, we can access all of these types of channels. So for example, even on videos, we would, obviously there's a travel intent, so we leverage travel intent signals from different data providers. For example, in a search engine, people have a search intent, and then we target them with a video on a particular destination. And then we also overlay that with what type of person that is viewing the video besides destination. So if they're a family, then we'll say going to Maldives or going to Koh Samui, then we'll be like, oh, stay at a Sheraton. If they're a young couple, we'll be like, stay at a W hotel. So we'll leverage data to personalize that. And then to take another level, like just take call to actions, for example, right? So different countries, we would create different call to actions, and then do a lot of different types of A/B testing. So there might have it be a generic version, and then we create country-specific ones, and then we actually, not only does the dynamic creative learn from it and pick which one is better, it also gives us data to the marketers to understand actually, which ones the local market responds better to let us do better creative in the next round.
Great. I mean, Annie, I'm interested to hear. We've heard that the brands use different platforms in different markets. What are you seeing in terms of how people are using different platforms within the Facebook family, whether it's WhatsApp in certain markets and Instagram in others, to reach their consumers?
We are certainly seeing different types of behaviors and platform preferences. I'd say, one of the biggest differences that we've seen actually is what's happening in Southeast Asia versus what's not happening in Southeast Asia. So just as an example, in Southeast Asia, people are about almost 2.5% more likely 2.5 times more likely to message a business, to learn more about it, to ask for more information, and go all the way through to transaction than people in the more developed markets. And one of the things, the biggest trends that I think someone mentioned in the previous panel is around conversational commerce and the kinds of commerce that's taking place in messaging apps, whether it's the ones that Facebook owns or even outside of that. McKinsey, in fact, estimated that last year in 2018, the size of the business of conversational commerce was nearly $16 billion. So if we look at where we're going to place our bets and continue to invest in conversational commerce, in Indonesia, it would be most likely in WhatsApp and Singapore as well, whereas we're really able to double down in markets like Vietnam and Thailand for Messenger, where that's a heavier use case, and we're already piloting payment options over there with some of our bank partners.
Great. And what are some of the main concerns that you hear from agencies or brands? What are you trying to push them to do more of on the platforms? Is there kind of a knowledge gap on what they can do and what they think Facebook is for?
I think that over the last 10 years, the use of social media has dramatically evolved, and we're seeing our agency partners really pave the way in helping brands and companies understand these differences. So take, for example, a few years ago where feed-based ads, so whether that's an Instagram feed or Facebook news feed, were the dominant way. We're now seeing a lot more use in stories, where stories are becoming more shoppable. Stories is where you can communicate directly through DR. So in Instagram, you can direct message a business or you can direct message an influencer. They're also helping advertisers or brands think about different ways to do storytelling, as Candice mentioned. Storytelling, we heard a lot about high value production and video, but influencers are really leading the way in creating fantastic content that's resonating in a much more relevant and authentic way with users. So I feel that it's more than a gap. These are the things that we're helping them push through with data points and proof points, and they're really helping us spread the knowledge with brands.
And obviously Facebook has announced, Instagram allowing influencers to be shoppable. What early indicators are you seeing with some of those newer products in terms of the take-up?
Sorry, can you say that?
Instagram as being able to be shoppable, as in sell products directly, and some of the newer products in terms of like empowering the influencers to be a bit more powerful for the brand. what are some of the early indicators you're seeing? And do you foresee that to be more popular in Asia because of the growth of influencers in this region?
Yeah, so we have been looking at influencers in sort of two buckets, right? One is your celebrities, whether it's your athletes or musicians or actors, who then create a page and they're trying to figure out, how do we monetize this? How do we work with brands? And there's a different strategy for that versus folks who have built a following because they have either an expertise in fitness or nutrition. And so there's two different strategies, and depending on what the brand is looking for, we really tailor that approach for them. In the past, I'd say 18 months alone, we've poured a lot of investment in Instagram to help our influencer community monetize their content better. So for example, we launched something called Purely Organic branded posts. So if I'm an Instagram influencer and I work with the brand, then with the brand's permission, I can get it tagged, and the brand is able to see how many of my followers were able to see that post, how many interacted with them, how many came to my website and convert. Now that has proven to be a successful model, we're introducing an ad platform behind it. So as an advertiser, you can choose to say, I want to show this content because it's so relevant, it's well created, to more than just the followers of that influencer. So that's just one example, and we are slowly and steadily working closely with our influencer community to roll out new products.
Great. And we're also increasingly seeing examples of brands looking to grow their data in order to better understand consumers, especially in a market like Southeast Asia. And then can you share, how Marriott is going about this, with some of the loyalty programs that you have, and how you use that data to help you not only fine-tune your products, but in your marketing, etc.?
So before I talk about digital specifically, if we take a step back, for you, we're a hospitality company, and we've been using actually first-party data for more than 50 years, right? So when you used to stay at a hotel, somebody writes down your preferences, right? Whether you like a bottled water or whether you like flowers, and then they give it to you, that's actually first-party data. So we always put the customer in the center of everything. It's just now today, with technology, we can take that personalization at a much larger scale, not just during your stay, but pre-stay and post-stay. And we can also enable this type of personalization to much more, to not just our luxury hotels like the Ritz-Carlton, but a Four Points or a Fairfield. So on digital specifically, the way we create personalization is the loyalty program. And our travel and loyalty program, Marriott Bonvoy, which replaced SPG, Story Preferred Guests, as well as Marriott Rewards and Ritz-Carlton Rewards. So through the loyalty program, we have a lot more data about your preferences, and using that, we would recommend personalized products for you, and as well as personalize your stay. And products recommendations on marketing could be like direct channels like emails, or through for China, for example, WeChat or Line, and also like earlier mentioned our DMP connecting with it, then we can also personalize our websites, as well as even third-party channels. But I think to close, I think one of the most important points of why we care so much about loyalty programs is because loyalty programs are built on trust. Meaning, when we leverage your data to personalize your experience, we always ask for permission. And that's what loyalty programs let us to do. It lets us to build a relationship and ask for permission instead of just, like a lot of companies, just collecting data about you and stitching them together to find out more about you. We openly ask what your preferences are, and we use that to personalize both your digital as well as your in-stay preferences.
Yeah. Candice, similarly, given the nature of your company, you must be collecting a lot of insights on shopping behaviors. Is that something that you can share with your brand partners to help them with their marketing or products or whatever it might be? And equally, how is it helping you with developing your own platform?
Sure. So for those who are not familiar, Shopback is a platform that enables consumers to uncover more value through rebates. In terms of customers, we really have two types. One would be brand partners, the other would be consumers, right? And we try to use data to serve both for a great experience or to drive marketing efficiency for brands. So let's talk about customers first. Similar to what Alan said, we do collect explicit data in terms of collecting what preferences consumers mention in different surveys, but we also collect implicit data. For example, in terms of communications that we send, let's just talk about newsletters. We actually tailor how often we send our newsletters depending on how frequently you open them. So the less you open them, we actually send you less. In terms of some of the proportion of newsletters we send as well, the content's quite personalized. So if we see that you actually respond really well for travel content, we actually would send more of that to you. Now, on the merchant side or brands, on the other side, the customers, we frequently would share insights with them. In fact, I'm very proud of my PR team and data team who put out research papers consolidated from insights we've had to understand and serve with the brands what are consumers' behavior. For example, March is a time that we see heavy travel bookings, and that's how we discuss with our brands how better to use March to market travel. Similarly, adjacent and but relevant merchants such as Klook, which market heavily on our experiences, we also work with them to take advantage of the March travel season. I'm wearing a t-shirt called Shopfest. The second half of the year, September on, that's when a lot of the e-commerces are focused on marketing their goods and services. I think we were learning from China's 11/11, and we very much work with brands to understand how we can best tap on this time period whereby consumers are clearly searching for year-end deals and Christmas gifts as well.
Great. And obviously we've talked about some of the different markets and how different platforms are popular in other markets versus others, and obviously there's new brands being created every day. I mean, Candice and Alan, from your point of view, do you think do you ever see examples of brands just being like, well, we know Facebook and Google are pretty big, we'll just try and stick most of our money there rather than trying to like understand the complexity of the market in Southeast Asia?
Can you repeat the question?
Do you think brands would put a lot of money in Facebook and Google rather than figuring out the kind of complexities of local markets?
I don't necessarily think so. I would say that the Googles and the Facebooks have very good products for small and medium businesses. Because they have very good third-party data. But I think the moment your company becomes a decent size and you're able to build your first-party data and do a lot of analysis yourself, then it's actually cheaper to leverage your first-party data and leverage ad networks and ad exchanges to target your customers. So I think their products are great, and I think it helps SMEs. But I think the more first-party data you have, it's worth investing and taking a look at it because you can really get higher ROI by having a multi-channel and multi-layered audience targeting strategy.
I think it depends on what the brands are solving for, really. To think about what marketing solution will be effective. For example, Google's a very search-dominant type business. I think Facebook to be a little bit more visual. So in this part of the world, in Southeast Asia, I think the C2C marketplaces have exploded tremendously, frankly, very much with the help of Facebook and Instagram. And in Indonesia, particularly, conversational commerce is a huge topic as well. So I think it really depends, and brands will need to be even more specific on what kind of problems they're trying to solve for to be able to embark on the solutions that they would need. It will depend on time period. It will depend on the specific problem. It will depend on costing, of course, as well.
Great. And, Annie, we've talked about how platforms are more popular in certain regions, but I'm keen to also find out with some of the specific ad products that you have or the tools you have available for businesses, whether there are certain ones that are more popular, or have you created new products specifically because of behavior that you've seen in this region?
Yeah, absolutely. So every year, our core engineering team makes a visit to one of the markets that we see an emergence of behavior. So continuing the topic of conversational commerce, this year in Thailand, we had a core group of our engineers come and visit to understand what is enabling conversational commerce. Is it from the big brands? Is it from some of the small and mid-sized businesses? What are the kinds of products that people are asking for, or what are the workarounds that that we can solve for as a technology company? So, for example, one of the first things that we realized was for conversational commerce, the most popular way to talk about a product, one way is of course to do a unboxing and talk about it and upload the video. But one that really resulted in real-time shopping experience was when someone is talking about a product, showing how to use it, and doing that experience live. And during that time period, what we started seeing is when people really wanted a particular product in Thailand, this is specifically Thai behavior, people used to write CF, means confirmed, no cancel. And what that resulted in is the seller having to go back and kind of guess, at that, like the 4-minute and 30-second point, I was talking about this particular brush, maybe that's the product that they're looking for. So that was a huge gap that we needed to solve for. So our engineering team prototyped a product. It's now a button that's right next to all the likes and loves that you see if you ever use live or if you're watching something live. And if you see a product you like, you just click that button. And what it does is it takes a snapshot of that exact moment when someone said it. So you know which product you're talking about. It sends it to your inbox, and then you're able to go back and contact that customer and say, are you sure this is the product you wanted? Here's how much it costs. Payment made directly online, and it solves for it. So that's one example of how we're doing that. We evolve it slowly over time. We want to make sure that there's enough demand for it, and this is really going to solve a problem that can't be solved either by another company, to be frank, that can plug into our API, that it truly needs to be a Facebook product. Or it's something that is a pretty small problem that is not going to have tremendous impact if we create a product.
Great. I want to also ask, Alan and Candice, you talked about the fact that you have all this really valuable data. When does it become too much? I.e., can brands really utilize to the full capability the data that they have? Are you finding that as we collect more and more, there's just often a kind of confusion as to how you can use that, and keen to understand.
Sure. I think with respect to data, it's also about what is relevant to use or not, and to be effective. And I would say the first principles that is important to identify is what problem you're trying to solve for. Using the wrong data for a meaningful problem will get you the wrong answers as well. So I think in terms of having a good data strategy on how do we collect and transform data so that it's actually usable would be the foundational part that needs to be right. And then on the strategy teams or the execution teams to be able to tap on the right set of data would be important. Even for algorithms are determined by the historical data, but if the problem set changes, you will need to take that into consideration too.
Yeah, so I think once you hit a wall with how a human marketer can be able to use segmentation, that's when you have a lot of data, and that's where the data science and the buzzwords like machine learning come in. But I think speaking on behalf of corporations that have a lot of systems from like the 80s and the 90s, I think the hardest part is the plumbing, right? Connecting all the systems. That is actually very hard to do and very expensive before you can enable the fancy stuff. So I think that's what we have experienced. For those of you who know that from the Marriott and Starwood, the acquisition, that was the biggest hotel group and biggest loyalty program merger. We're still doing a lot of that plumbing. So even though we have a lot of the first-party data, it still takes a lot of effort to connect those data sources, and then afterwards you need to be able to connect those models to the various marketing technology platforms that are across different companies. Obviously, you have the big players that buy up companies and consolidate the marketing technology stack. So that makes it easier. But then you also have the downside. Once you're locked into one big vendor, then it's hard to switch out. So that's something that we wrestle with and something that we think about a lot.
Great. And before we go to the audience questions, Annie, I'm just keen to ask you, we've talked about some of the products that have come out of Facebook doing research in Southeast Asia. Would you say that Southeast Asia is, can sometimes be driving some of that innovation that spreads to Facebook globally? Because I think often people assume it's US down. What would be your view?
Yeah, I'm really bullish on Southeast Asia right now. If we look at the 90s, where it was the first time that we really started looking at e-commerce and shopping online, and Amazon made it big, eBay made it big. I think now we're going to start seeing more and more commerce happening via messaging apps. And the fact that Southeast Asia is where we're predominantly seeing that take place. And it's not just within messaging apps. I think it's also the first time where you could be probably, sitting in your living room for days on end, and on your phone you could discover a brand, you could discover a product, you could discover a service for the first time. You can learn more about it, whether it's by engaging with a video or chatting online and learning about it and making that all the way through to transaction. So I think the phone has become really powerful, and I think Southeast Asia, where there's more phones than there's human beings and more data connections as well, I'm really excited about this future.
Great. So yeah, we'll go to some of the questions and see what the audience want to ask. Gosh, that's hard to read. Do you see community building playing a big part in branding moving forward? Think Facebook groups. Emotion-driven engagement. Well, Annie, I guess we'll go to you first, and then if anyone else wants to pitch in.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the favorite things that I recently read about is how important it is for brands to also tap into the community aspect. So we work very closely with some really big brands that create vision videos that are a couple of minutes long. But how can we actually take it down to the community level and get them engaged and get people actually having a voice, have a say, take an action, donate money, or create a certain campaign or event to get behind it. So yeah, it's definitely a huge part.
I would like to really add on that because we actually use Facebook groups quite a bit for community building. And we learned that as perhaps a startup at this stage, we are across 7 countries, 300 people strong. But in terms of building advocacy, it's about connecting with people on the ground, understanding what's important to them, how do we better develop our product. We also learned that in India, community building was the secret for Xiaomi's big growth. So I would say that community building, at least in the geographies that we operate in, and as part of philosophy in Shopback, that's a huge thing.
Yeah, we actually have quite a few communities. So some of you might go to Point Sky or Flyer T. So we have communities there that just love travel hacking and traveling for free. And then you also have groups of members that are part of a loyalty program that love experiences. And I think that's what we focus on a lot. So some of you might know about Moments. We have partnerships with Mercedes and Man United where people get exclusive access. For example, like with Mercedes, like on a race day, they get to ride to the actual race with Lewis Hamilton or Valtteri. And we build these moments and these opportunities for members to have experiences in entertainment, culinary, and all that. And we're looking for partners, not just global, but also in specific markets across Southeast Asia. And I think this really builds a group of people that really love traveling, love exploring, love discovering. It's all about our company's values, that we really believe travel enriches the world, bridges cultures. So we try to build communities around experiences.
Amazing. And the next question we'll ask, we've got 50 seconds left, so we'll have to be quick. What do you think big brands or government organizations can do in terms of marketing, especially if the public already has a certain perception of them? I guess it's difficult to talk on the government organization. None of us work in the government here, but we have a perception of them. Does anyone want to chip in?
I think it probably goes back to Candice's point about leveraging communities, like really understanding what people are potentially saying or what the pain points are, and how you can leverage that community feel to change your brand perception, or at least learn more so that you know what are some of the misconceptions, and then go about changing those.
Great. Okay. I think I'll take this opportunity to thank all my lovely panelists. If you could join me in thanking them. It's Annie from Facebook, Candice from Shopback, and Alan from Marriott. Thank you.
Thank you very much to our panelists there.